All right, this video is going to cover how I applied my C stripe to my 68 Fairlane. Now, you may realize that the Fairlane didn't get a C stripe. That was a Torino stripe, but too bad. I liked it on the red car and I did it anyway. This is also, you know, it's not a GT or anything. And technically, from what I understand, the convertible would have a different C stripe altogether. If you look on here, see how it follows the body line? The convertible body stripe actually goes in a straight line here, like what's on the Ranchero. I didn't like that, so I did this instead. So I'm no purist, obviously. So I'm going to go over how to do these decals on these cars. My method for doing it. I've done vinyl for a long time. I used to be a graphic designer and I did signs and stuff like that. So I'm pretty experienced with it. I will say this, there's a trick to allowing you to reposition the decals, and it'll be a little bit more forgiving if you use that trick. And that's using a spray bottle with a couple drops of Dawn dish soap in some water. If you spray that on the surface and then apply the decals, you can reposition them and peel them back off, and then you squeegee out the water and you let it dry and it stays in place. I did not do that. To me, it's extra messy and a little bit harder. So, you know, you may want to if you have never done this before, because it's a little more forgiving. In fact, Phoenix Graphics, where I bought these, sells a special repositioner fluid, but I suspect it's just soapy water, which is what I would use anyway. Okay, so the stripe on this car, it's all about relationships. There's a couple of we'll call them data points, places where the stripe is positioned that are critical, and the biggest dictator of where the stripe gets placed is the top stripe on the fender. Everything else kind of builds off of that. Now, I looked at reference photos all over the internet. I scaled them all out. I did the best I could to position them the way they were at the factory, and I still didn't really quite get it right, and I'll show you why in a minute. But I will say this, the top fender stripe seems to be the most important one. So right about here, well, actually right here, this relationship, this distance right here is 1.25 inches. And so we know that this needs to be positioned here. And then the next most important position is this relationship right here. Now, this looks funky. I know it's not right, but if you move this decal down so it's at the top of this light, this gap right here would be quite a bit larger, and I think it would look funny and run downhill really weird. So I felt like this relationship was way more important than this, because I can fix this with a knife if it really bothers me too much, or even add another piece of vinyl, which is not optimal, but that's where I'm at with it. Okay, so in my opinion, this is where I would place it, and you're welcome to go look at a bunch of other reference photos if you like, but all the photos I looked at showed this. Okay, so here's the deal. We know that's 1.25 inches there. We know we have this relationship here. I tried to line this up with the body line as best I could. You can see right now it runs a little bit uphill, but well, too bad. That's where it ended up. So once it's in position, all of these decals end up on one sheet, and they're all next to each other, which is kind of makes it a little bit difficult. So you just cut a margin of paper and transfer tape of about 1/2 inch around each decal, and that's enough to allow it to be positioned. Normally, when you do decals on a vehicle or something like this, you want an extra paper on here, and you put tape at the top, and you fold the thing up, and you use that as a hinge, and you stick the stuff down. Well, I did that a little bit different. What I did is I used the middle as a hinge, and I'll show you what I mean. I have a sample thing taped to the fender to show you what I'm talking about. Now, sometimes you can say you wanted this stripe, say this is a stripe, and you want it to start 1/2 inch from this body line. You can put a piece of tape at the measurement you want and use that as your reference point. So you put a piece of tape and you line up your sticker there. Then you tape it in place. And once it's in place and you're happy with it, like I was here, the next thing to do is you make a hinge. Now, this is going to get nutty because I'm one-handed and I'm holding this thing, but what you do is you peel this back, and then, bear with me, I'm going to make it shaky cam. Hang on. So now I've peeled away the transfer tape, and let's pretend there's a stripe stuck to the back of this. Say there's a stripe on the back of this, because that's how it'll come. It's 3 layers. Now, what you don't want to do is allow this to fold over on itself. Then it's done, and you're calling Phoenix Graphics and ordering another set. So be very careful when you do this. The next step, again, one-handed, sorry. I take a pair of scissors and I cut the backer off, and then I hold my decal real close to the body line at a very, very shallow angle. And while I'm holding that up with my right hand, let's pretend this is my right hand, I take the squeegee and I squeegee that down. And then when I'm done, I could peel this up and it would leave the decal in place. It would leave the stripe in place. Again, there's no stripe here, so that's not going to happen. So, and also, I don't want to do that yet. This is held in position. The stripe would be where I want it to be. Now I peel this back. I peel the tape off, the backer paper. I do that, and then I would take my stripe and pull it taut so it's not this way or this way. I don't want it to do this or this. I want to pull it taut. And then I would take my squeegee while holding it away from the fender and my end with my hand, and then I want to run this thing down and squeeze out the air bubbles and lay it down flat. And then when it's all said and done, I would want to leave the stripe by peeling off the transfer tape. And I'm going to show you the trick for peeling off transfer tape. What you don't want to do is pull it upwards. You want to pull it in an oblique angle. What that does is it makes sure that you don't peel the stripe up with it. So the stripe would be right here now, stuck to the car, and then this much less tacky transfer tape would come off and leave the stripe on the fender. So that's the technique for putting down the vinyl. That whole process could have been done by squirting some water under this thing with the soap, and if we had screwed up, we could move the thing around a little bit with the transfer tape. I don't do that, so good luck. Okay, so now, this video is getting long, but too bad. So here's the first chunk of stripe on the fender. Now we have another relationship. We know that this stripe starts where this stripe starts. We know we want it lined up there, so that relationship's already established. And the next relationship we have that I have seen in photos is this ugly gap in the stripe that Ford did. I really hate that, but oh well. It looked to me like the stripe, the lower stripe lined up with the door handle. Same thing here, okay? So now we have another relationship established. We position the sticker where it goes on the door. Big piece of tape right in the middle. Peel this back, tear the tape off, pull it taut, use your squeegee to lay it down. Now it's stuck in position. You peel up this part, do the same thing, and let the tape run past, and then you fold it around the inside so it doesn't wear away. Now, what can happen is this sticker will then fall over top of this one if there's too much excess and stick to it. So you can take a piece of this paper, the smooth side, not the paper side with the lettering, but this side, and just put it in place, tape it right there so that your real stripe doesn't stick to this stripe and screw things up. So that's another little tip to make sure that you don't overlay this and make it stick to it. So, but you want some extra to wrap around it. So now we've established the two most important relationships, this stripe and this stripe. That dictates where this goes. That dictates where this goes. And if you look, it follows the body line, but then it gets narrower and narrower until it hits about a 1/2 inch right here. And that's what all the reference photos I saw looked like. And this one's a little bit more difficult because it's so long, but I put a big chunk of tape right here. I peeled this away, tore the backer stuff off, squeegeed it down, tore off the tape, and then laid that down following the body line while trying not to steer it. I let the stripe itself dictate where it laid. Okay, so once that's done, you have the full top of the C stripe on. The next thing you do is look at this relationship right here where this lines up and make sure that's accurate. And then know from looking at photos that this relationship here and this relationship here actually is a taper. It gets fatter here. Now, from the body line to about here, I got it at like, let's say 4.5 inches. You know, up here it's about 3 3/4. So you can see it does taper down. And if I was like a super professional, I'd take this trim off, wrap it around there and put the trim back on, but yeah, I don't care that much. And then this one picks up at about 5.5 inches from the body line. And it ends up at about 6 1/4 at the far end. So what I ended up doing is I stuck this on here. I started the taper. We'll call that 5 5/5, 5.5. And then I ended up using this big straight edge. I put some tape on the back of it so I didn't scratch my paint. And I lapped that over the stripe, and that helped me dictate where the one on the door went. And I used the same technique. Tape in the middle, folded it back, peeled off the backer, stuck it down until it lined up here, wrapped it around the door. I did that end, and then I used the straight edge again on top of the straight edge here on top of the decal, and applied the point at that end. Now, once that was all done, and I extrapolated all my dimensions from my photo references, now I had a finished side of the car, and I transferred all those dimensions from this side to the other side, and I used all my dimensions from this side so both sides of the car would match. And that's how it gets done. Now, if you run into some problems, this is just white vinyl. If you don't buy the reflective stripe, you can just buy white vinyl and piece it in again. Just hope you don't screw up the fender one, because that's going to be really hard to replace easily. And also, if you get like little air bubbles in here, it's kind of hard to see. There might be a couple. With the sun and the heat, you can squeegee those out. But if you can't, take your razor blade and poke it and rub it down with your finger, and you can get rid of those air bubbles. And that is pretty much how I got the C-stripe on my car.